You don't remember the first time you heard it, only that it was quiet, repeated gently. A phrase dropped into your mind like a warm cloth over your eyes. Don't touch your shoes after sunset. No reason, no explanation. Just the kind of rule wrapped in comfort, passed down from a grandmother's breath. You didn't ask questions. You just obeyed. But years later, you find a Reddit post. A girl from another country. She writes about the same phrase. Whispers from her grandmother. Never touch your shoes after sunset. One day, she ignores it and wakes up blind for nearly 24 hours. No diagnosis. No injury. Just darkness. Then nothing. Her vision returns, but the fear never leaves. That's when it starts, the quiet unraveling of trust. The realization that what we call wisdom might be something else. Not folklore. Not guidance. But control. Every culture tells its children stories. About shadows. About broken rules. About what happens when you whistle after dark or call someone's name 3 times. They say it's just tradition, harmless tales meant to protect us from danger. But when you map them across continents, something strange appears. The rules are eerily similar. The punishments too. The structure, the cadence, the emotional pull, nearly identical. In a declassified report from DARPA, barely redacted, there's mention of something called SCP, Storytelling Compliance Programs. Between 1973 and 1975, rural schoolchildren were exposed to carefully engineered narratives. Not as curriculum, as bedtime stories, as overheard tales. Within months, researchers saw higher obedience, fewer behavioral issues, and total retention of the story. One line from the file still haunts researchers today. Stories remembered better than commands, especially when told with love. Maybe that's why they always come from someone close. Someone soft. A mother. A grandfather. A sibling. They say it's for your own good. But you never get to ask who decided what's good. You never get to choose whether you believe it. Because it's already inside you. On /r/nosleep, one user described dreaming of a man in a rocking chair who tells riddles with no answers. She said she hadn't heard the story before, but when she woke up, she already knew how it ended. Another thread spoke of a lullaby no one could remember learning, yet dozens reported singing the same words as children, across countries and generations. The repetition doesn't stop. The lines stay lodged in your mind like code. Don't eat what you can't name. Don't open the door if it knocks twice, then once. Never speak while the wind is blowing. They sound like nonsense, until someone breaks the rule. And something answers back. The truth is, the most dangerous stories aren't the ones told by liars. They're the ones told by people who love you. People who believe. Who pass them down without question. Because that's how programming survives. Not by force, but by comfort. Ask yourself this. If the story keeps you safe, who decided what you needed to be protected from? If it warns you not to speak, who benefits from your silence? And if you were told the story before you even knew how to ask why, was it really your story at all? Let me know when you're ready for Chapter 2. You think you remember it. The words. The order. The ending. You'd bet your life on it. But when you go back, when you ask your brother, your mother, the friend who used to cry during the scary part, their version doesn't match. It's close. Familiar. But not the same. A character you don't recall. A missing warning. A punishment that was lighter. Or worse. You tell yourself it's just memory. A foggy detail. Childhood distortion. But then it happens again. With another story. Another person. A version you've never heard before, that somehow feels more correct than your own. The stories shift when you speak them aloud. You can feel it. Like they're alive. Like they know they're being watched. And the more you try to capture them, to write them down, record them, pin them to time, the more they slip through your hands. In 1971, a comparative folklore study accidentally uncovered a pattern that still hasn't been fully explained. Ghana, South India, Appalachia. 3 regions, thousands of miles apart, with no known cultural contact. Yet the exact same structure appeared in their oral legends. The same arc. The same 3 rules. The same pause before the consequence. Scholars said it was coincidence. Others said it was mythic archetype. But when they analyzed the recordings, something darker emerged. In each region, the directional verbs inside the story were eerily specific. Turn left at the tree. Kneel first, then knock. Bite your finger before speaking. These weren't just narrative choices. They were instructions, ritual codes. And once you notice them, you start hearing them everywhere. On Reddit, someone uploaded a file called The Whispering Ones, an audio story stitched from dozens of old radio archives. It was meant to be harmless, a novelty. But within days, users claimed their versions were changing on playback. Not just tone, not just pacing. Entire lines were different. New names inserted. Distances altered. In one case, a user swears the file whispered his name. And when moderators investigated, they found the file had been re-uploaded over 15 times, each with slight, inexplicable modifications. YouTube auto-captions show something stranger. On videos covering orphan warnings or folklore-based disappearances, the subtitles glitch, not at random, but precisely during the key narrative beats. Words get swapped. Lines repeat in reverse. Symbols appear in place of letters. Linguists say it's a bug. Engineers say it's compression noise. But compression doesn't target themes. And symbols don't replace phrases like, "Do not remember it wrong." A researcher, anonymous, discredited, wrote this in a buried blog post. The story doesn't change over time. It changes when you remember it. And that's what haunts you most. Not the idea that stories evolve, but the possibility that they don't. That they remain the same, fixed, coded, perfect. And what's shifting is you. Every version becomes a test. Every change becomes a consequence. And the more you try to find the original, the further you drift from the safety of forgetting. Because these stories weren't meant to be remembered perfectly. They were meant to stay quiet. So the question isn't whether you got it right. The question is, what found you when you got it wrong? ChatGPT said, it starts before you can speak, before you can walk, before you even know what a voice is. A sound, gentle, measured, wrapped in lullaby. It doesn't shout. It doesn't plead. It simply tells. And you listen, not because you understand, but because something deeper than language already knows to obey. You believe it's your mother, or your father, or God. But what if it was never anyone? What if the first voice you heard was planted? In 1978, a classified audio cognition study, heavily redacted but still partially available, documented the testing of what they called embedded parentals. Lullabies encoded with modified tones of authority were played to infants in simulated environments. No words, just inflection. Years later, the subjects were tested. When exposed to similar frequencies, they followed commands without hesitation. Even as adults. Even when they didn't know why. The study ended abruptly. Funding vanished. Personnel were reassigned. But a single phrase from a surviving memo still lingers like static. Memory is overrated. Calibration is not. On /r/UFOs, a user posted about waking up with a sentence in their head, "Remember what I said about the doors?" They assumed it was a dream, until 3 others commented that they'd heard the exact phrase. One in Sweden. One in rural Argentina. One from a woman who'd never left her assisted care facility in Florida. None had been told it. None could trace its origin. But all remembered it like it had always been there. Cross-posted in /r/glitch___. Another thread collected phrases from childhood that no adult around them ever said. One user recalled being told, "Don't eat the blue light." Another, "She's not your real reflection." These aren't fragments of imagination. They're too specific, too direct. And they always come in the same tone. Calm. Familiar. Undeniable. A recent AI ethics project at MIT trained generative models to create moral nursery rhymes, non-existent songs designed to encode behavior. Participants were told they were part of a memory test. Months later, during unrelated studies, over 40% of them instinctively followed rules embedded in those songs, even when they couldn't remember hearing them. One subject refused to enter a room with red wallpaper. When asked why, she simply said, "Because red means wait." And then there's the Twitter thread that went dark after 48 hours. An independent linguist posted what she called starter phrases, short commands or warnings that appear in trauma dreams across languages, cultures, even religions. She'd found 33 of them, all eerily similar, all traced to no known origin. Phrases like, hold the breath, not the hand. Turn away before it answers. Say nothing if it knows your name. The first voice you hear shapes everything. How you speak, how you wait, what you believe about danger, about silence, about what happens when no one else is watching. But what if that voice wasn't yours? Not inherited, not earned, installed. You think it was comfort, but comfort can be reverse engineered. You think it was love, but love can be mimicked. You trust that it came from someone you knew, but what if it came first and everyone else just copied the tone? So ask yourself this. If the first voice taught you who to be, what happens if it wasn't trying to protect you at all? What if it was just trying to keep you in line? And what if you still obey it? ChatGPT said, it's the moment between your steps, between the breath in and the breath out. No noise, no company, no threat. But then, like a faint pressure against your ribs, it's there. A phrase. So, too soft to hold, too clear to ignore. You turn. No one. You check your phone. Nothing. But you heard it. Or maybe not heard, felt. Like memory echoing before it's even born. You tell yourself it's just a memory. But what if it's not? What if it's a signal? In forums buried deep beneath conspiracy threads, a pattern emerges. Children humming strange melodies when they believe they're alone. Parents record the tunes, thinking they're cute, eerie, maybe just nonsense. But then years pass. Decades. And an AI lab releases generated samples built to simulate primal comfort melodies. The patterns match. Nearly note for note. The same lullaby. Created before the children were born, but heard by them all the same. Between 2006 and 2013, satellite data from low-orbit surveillance programs logged anomalies in urban silence bands. They weren't sounds exactly, more like intervals. Non-human frequencies spiking between 2:13 and 3:07 a.m. across major cities. Never loud. Never disruptive. But always the. Researchers said it was a software echo. Engineers said it was compression. But one private contractor, dismissed quietly from a French aerospace firm, published a final analysis. These aren't errors. They're messages. Just not meant for us. Barely Sociable's deep dive into the audioglyphs barely scratches the surface. But what it hints at is deeper than anyone wants to admit, that stories may no longer require words. That there are structures seeded into your day, the sequence of traffic lights, the timing of elevator chimes, the pause between push notifications. That those are the verses now. Not told. Not written. Just placed ambiently. In clinical reports kept off the record, psychologists share whispers of something chilling. Patients, from 6 different countries, all report hearing the same 4-line phrase during moments of panic. Not in dreams. Not hallucinations. But interruptions. The phrase appears mid-thought, mid-panic, like it was waiting. If you run, it finds you. If you speak, it names you. If you stop, it waits. If you listen, it enters. Doctors call it a cognitive echo. But there is no precedent for global consistency across unlinked patients, with no shared media, language, or history. So maybe it's not madness. Maybe it's not your imagination. Maybe you were never meant to hear it like a story. Maybe it only works when you don't notice. When you're alone. When you're raw. When the walls don't talk, but the space between them does. Because if stories no longer need mouths, if they no longer need books, if they can live in static, in rhythm, in silence itself, then you haven't stopped listening. You've just forgotten how to notice. And what's worse, the story hasn't forgotten you. ChatGPT said, you said it like a joke. Half smile, half memory. Don't open the door if they knock twice, then once. You laughed. Maybe your kid laughed too. Maybe it was just something you remembered from someone else. Your aunt, your teacher, a cartoon. Just a story. Just a line. But somewhere, in the dark where echoes go to live, something turned toward you. Not because you heard it, but because you passed it on. In dozens of cold case reports, buried beneath official timelines and disappearance dates, one thread keeps surfacing. Victims, unrelated, unconnected, all repeated nearly identical warnings in the days before they vanished. One boy told his friend, "You can't answer if it says your name backwards." A woman left a voicemail for her sister, "If the mirror's wrong, don't fix it." No one thought much of it at the time. They just sounded strange. Like they were remembering something they hadn't learned yet. A file marked obsolete in a declassified NSA dump holds 3 lines worth noticing. They're half-redacted, but the intent is clear. Operational potential of parable-based transmission methods shows consistent behavioral uptake. Further testing suspended indefinitely. Suspended. Not disproven. Not closed. Just paused. On a deleted Nexpo video, one uploaded, then scrubbed within 12 hours. Viewers claimed physical effects after repeating specific phrases from the audio. One wrote, "My mouth felt like it wasn't mine." Another, "I couldn't stop blinking in sets of 3. The most chilling, I said the line. Something in my apartment said it back." More disturbing than all of this, though, is what doctors are calling story loops. People, otherwise stable, locked into obsessive repetition, telling the same short story again and again. To anyone who'll listen. To no one. Even while crying. One case involves a teenage girl who repeated a 14-word warning 187 times over 3 days. Nothing anyone did could make her stop. Until she did. But afterward, she didn't remember saying anything at all. Maybe that's the last phase. Maybe the story doesn't want to be passed on forever. Maybe it wants to be told once. And then buried. You think you're just quoting something weird. You think it's a curiosity. A cultural ghost. But once it comes through you, once you say it, you're no longer the audience. You're part of the system now. So the question becomes, can you forget the story you just told? Can you pull it out by the root? Or is it too late the moment it touches your tongue? Because maybe the only way out is silence. But maybe even silence is already too loud.